Hello, everybody. Okay, so here we are again. I'm doing a short time live on YouTube for the benefit of anybody really who is having some kind of difficulty. Please do write your questions on the live chat, and I will do my best to answer it. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Lena Fenton, and I am a couples and sex therapist. I also work with rituals, however, and I'm offering this free Q&A on a regular weekly basis, whilst people are basically indoors, spending probably too much time with their near and dear ones. Although for some people, it's very much a wonderful opportunity to spend quality time together and deepen their bonds and relationship. For some people, maybe not so much so. And I've talked a little bit about that in previous relationships. What I thought I would talk about, if there's no one here with questions for me, I thought I would talk about addiction, sex and porn addiction. And I think there is a very real difference between the two, because the behavior is different, I guess. I am going to drink a cup of coffee whilst I talk as well, so forgive me if that is annoying to you. I've been working full on since this morning, and so I haven't really had much of a chance to stop, and I didn't want to be late for this session. Before I start, let me tell you a little bit about my background. I've been a psychotherapist or a counselor, if you prefer. I use those terms interchangeably, but I've been working with people since 1994. I specialize originally, my focus was on adults who've been sexually abused as children. I did that for about 10 years alongside, best part of that time I was working alongside the local mental health unit as an independent therapist. I also worked at a women's prison. I also worked at a women's charity. So I've seen quite a lot of very distressed and very traumatized and damaged people. But I've also seen them survive and not just survive, but thrive, really, going from surviving to thriving. I think that's what I'm trying to say, really. And I did that for about 10, 12 years. About 2004, 2005, I also trained as a life coach, and I added NLP training to master practitioner level in 2005. And so a few years later, when I decided then to take up training, work specifically with couples, and once I'd completed that, I then did a master's in sex therapy. And sex therapy is really about sexual dysfunctions, and specifically with a focus on couples, because sex is generally something that you do with somebody else. So it makes sense that you're looking at how people interact sexually and psychologically. I think that so here specifically, I wanted to talk a little bit about what addiction to sex or porn is. I think that it's very difficult with addiction, I think, is a very difficult subject, and I think it's often difficult to quantify. And I'm by no means any kind of an expert on what addiction is. And I certainly haven't specialized in working with sexual addiction, but inevitably in my work as a sex therapists, of course, this kind of issue comes up. And so I thought, I guess what's on my mind is that with people having to stay indoors a lot, people who may have an excessive use of porn would certainly be, their situation would be worsened at this time, because there's almost no other outlet. So it would probably be very difficult. Somebody's saying hello, so I'm just going to answer that. I'm wondering if you have a question. Okay, so let me just begin by just talking about the difference between what I think, and this is just my own take on it, the difference between sex addiction and porn addiction, because I think with sex addiction, it's more about having sex with people, and porn addiction is more about perhaps preferring porn to sex with people. So I think they are, in my own opinion, for what it's worth, they are very different propositions, really. But as I was already saying a bit earlier, I think that this is a time now when, if you do have a porn addiction, it's going to be worse because you are cooped up indoors, and the one outlet is going to be the use of pornography. Now, the use of pornography can be anything from occasionally going through, various videos, to hours and hours of compulsively, watching videos and masturbating. And I've certainly worked with both ends of that range, if you like. I think that from my point of view, when it becomes an addiction is when it is a compulsive thing, so something that you cannot not do. So you might be having normal, regular sex with your partner. That might be all fine, but very regularly, possibly daily, you're also masturbating to pornography, or at least watching pornography. And that it's almost like some people, well, I was going to say, some people kind of automatically put the news on, perhaps. This is a bit more than that, because it's almost like, you can choose whether or not to put the news on. Somebody who has an addiction generally can't. It's something that they must do. A little bit like obsessively compulsive, this that you have to do. Not that that's an addiction, please don't confuse the two. And actually, I think that a lot of people who have porn addiction are really quite distressed by it. And certainly if it's something that they do secretly, which it often is, then it's even more distressing. And I think that if the partner does find out, then it can kind of really blow up the whole relationship. And I guess that's the kind of thing that perhaps is happening quite a lot whilst we're in this kind of lockdown situation, that things are being discovered about your partner that you didn't know, or difficult to hide things from your partner that you might not have shared in the past. And that's certainly something, a serious consideration for what it means to be locked in, I guess, or enclosed within a limited territory with somebody that you may love, but with whom you may have lost the ability to be really emotionally intimate with. And I think that addiction actually, to some extent, blocks real connection, real intimacy, emotional intimacy. and it's something that really does need treatment. So I guess I'm thinking, what can I say about it more than that? I guess what you can, part of the thing that I think fosters an addiction is secrecy. You don't want to be discovered. You don't want you. It's something that you do on your own, in private. It's your thing. But that, in a sense, that very fact actually feeds and promotes their behavior even more. The thing is that there's also a lot of shame, I think, for people attached to this kind of thing. There's a lot of shame in admitting it to yourself, let alone to somebody else. I think often we don't want people to see us in that way. A person who is addicted to pornography doesn't want to be known or seen as having an addiction like that. I think part of the shame is also about not feeling that there isn't a sense of control, that you're ashamed. I think a human being can be ashamed of the fact that they can't control it, that somehow this thing has taken over their lives, and it obscures everything else. It removes them from really being engaged in anything else. When an addiction gets to that extent, I think that it's really very, very dangerous for you in your life. People have lost jobs, people have lost families, people have lost wives or husbands and children. People have lost a great deal. Like most addictions, once it really takes a hold of you in your brain, it's like, I guess it's a feeling like your brain doesn't know how to stop. And even if you've had your fill, let's say, of sexual satisfaction, your brain, it's something in your brain just needs to keep going, just needs to keep doing it. So it's not even about hunger and fulfillment. It comes at a level where it doesn't make actual rational sense. And it is, like most addictions, as it builds, it becomes very self-destructive indeed. So let me just say here right away that you can, there are places, 12-step programs, a little bit like AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, that also can help you get on board with recovery, I guess is the best word that I can use. There's Sex Addicts Anonymous, SAA, or Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. And both of those fellowships offer online meetings. They offer a whole host of tools and ways of recovery, really, from the disease. And they call it a disease. And in a sense, I suppose, the individual, after having made love with their partner, would then go and masturbate to pornography. And they actually said that they thought it was better than sex with their partner. That's kind of the level that this thing can go to. So one of the ways that you can look to recovery is through one of the 12-step fellowship. And I guess if you have more, and often it's the case that more than one addiction, there'll be a primary addiction, a secondary addiction, and I think sex can often be a secondary addiction, and would certainly benefit from a 12-step program alongside whatever the primary addiction actually is. that's something that you can do in private and online. Seek out the 12-step fellowships. The other thing I think that you can do is do your best to talk with somebody whom you feel safe with, whether it's your partner or a close relative or a dear friend, somebody who would stand by you regardless of what they feel about what you're doing, if that makes sense. Do you have somebody like that in your life? If so, then begin to talk to them. Reveal in small what some of the things that you're worried about without necessarily giving the whole picture. There are, of course, all kinds of online helplines that you can also, starting with Samaritans, of course. I think that you could sometimes you could also speak to somebody at Samaritans if you're getting really desperate and your behaviour has become that destructive. There's no reason why you shouldn't call them. If you're still at a stage where you might feel that you can still control it yourself, then rather than trying to stop altogether, one of the things you could do is try and wean yourself off. So decide for yourself how long, dependent on your current usage, begin to reduce gradually so that you still get your fix, inverted commas, but you reduce the amount of time you spend watching porn. If it's, instead of porn addiction, if it's sex addiction, so just to switch over a little bit, if it's sex addiction that is your problem, i.e. kind of meeting up with people and having random sex, then what you might want to think about is, are you safe? One of the first rules, as far as I'm concerned, is ensuring that you keep yourself medically safe. Are you using protection? Are you ensuring that you're not going to catch an STD of some kind? And believe me, there are many out there. So whatever sexual activity you undertake that is part of your compulsion or your addiction, try and if you're dealing with if you're meeting other strangers, for example, then by all means, the first step towards healthy behavior is to ensure that you're medically safe. Wear protection. There's all sorts of protections, and you can certainly, we'll talk about that perhaps another time. Part of my take on porn is that it is designed to, like any film, it is designed to reproduce your fantasies, and it does that very well. The thing that I think has to be remembered, and the thing that I want to make really clear, is that everything you see in a pornographic film is fake. Every sound, every move, it's all fake. It's people acting. It's not people having fun. It's not, it's not what they would necessarily choose to be doing. They're doing a job. The real sex for those actors happens in the privacy of their relationships, assuming they have one. And however, whatever their public persona is, try and understand that it's all fake. It's an act. It's a put on act. That's what they do. They're porn actresses. Otherwise, they'd be doing it for fun or something. they're doing it to get paid. They're doing it to make money. So you can make a lot of money, like prostitution. I guess you can make a lot of money quite quickly. And there are lots of videos out there that will tell you about what goes on behind the scenes. And it might be worth you thinking about looking for those, you know, how are pornographic films actually made, what actually goes on. And I'm thinking of a documentary made on Channel 4 some years ago, where they took 2 or 3 guys and they took them to America from England. They took them to America to show them what actually happens when films are made, what happens to the actors and actresses, what happens to them physically, let alone emotionally. And out of the 3 or 4 men that went out there, not one of them was not affected when they saw the reality of actually what goes on. So remind yourself each time that this is fake. It's all pretend. He's not really having an orgasm. You know, the penis looks that big because of the angle they're filming at. You know, the amount of climax is probably not real either. Or if it is, it's augmented in some way. You know, there are many ways of making, you know, if you've seen any science fiction films at all, you can see how easily the eye is manipulated into believing whatever the director wants you to believe. So just when you remind yourself of that, I think the idea behind that is to switch away from this fantasy world that pornography creates as an aid, really, to making it less important, less precious, less fantastic. Because real life and real people it just isn't like that. It's just not real. It's not. Nobody has perfect bodies. Nobody's instantly aroused, and it's. I think that in order to really experience real life, you have to appreciate that it's not perfect and that it's okay. It's not supposed to be perfect. The only things that are going to be perfect are our fantasies, because in our fantasies, we can ordain and order everything in perfectly to what our desires are. You're not going to fantasize getting it wrong. You're not going to fantasize not being able to climax. You're not going to fantasize, you know, the reality of who you are, because unless you're very, you know, unless you're some kind of egomaniac, I suppose, most of us human beings are a little bit defective, are a little bit, well, just not perfect. Perfection doesn't exist here, and that's okay. And part of developing oneself as a human being is really coming to terms with that the world doesn't need to be perfect. So I want to just kind of reassure you that it's very, very possible to at least reduce or come away entirely from your addiction. And that's not to say I don't have any moral issues with pornography. I don't have any kind of, oh, it's wrong. I think it becomes damaging when it's a compulsion. So my issue is not that pornography is bad or wrong, but rather that if it becomes a compulsion, then that's going to be destructive to your life. And as a therapist, I'm all about making the quality of your life, or helping you make it the quality of your life better. So it's not about what's right or wrong, or you know, pro or against religion. Those things are irrelevant from my point of view. What I'm about and what I want to help you with is make your life as good as it can be, as good as you want it to be. But it'll never be perfect, because life doesn't exist in the real world like that. Perfection only exists in our fantasies, as I've already said. So you've got to ask yourself the question, is it okay for you to live in a fantasy world whilst your real world is falling apart? Or do you want to actually live in the real world and let the fantasy world relegate it to a more secondary position? I guess if you're really into porn, that might be a preferred choice for you. And it's a very personal choice as to how you want to live your life, obviously. So that's the first thing you need to ask yourself. Is this actually how you want to live your life? As if it is that you are a porn addict. And if the answer is no, it's not how you want to live your life, then begin to put into place the things that I've already suggested. And I'll reiterate those. And then, unless there is somebody with an actual question, I'm probably going to close this down for today, and then I'll be back on Thursday again. But the things that I've suggested that you could do are, first of all, try and locate, just do a Google search online for either Sex Addicts Anonymous or Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. And you will find the websites, whether they're English or American, where you'll be able to find a whole host of tools to help you, A, identify whether you're an addict, first of all. B, there'll be meetings, online meetings, telephone meetings that you can attend to. And these meetings are along the lines of all the 12-step fellowships, like AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and Narcotics Anonymous, and so on, Gamblers Anonymous, and etc. They all work on a 12-step program. So and these are free, or you make a contribution according to what you can afford. There is also sex therapists like myself who work specifically on an individual basis. But perhaps the first step is to begin to reduce the level of secrecy, because I believe that addiction breeds better in secrecy. So if you can find, if there is one other person in your life who would accept you in spite of your addiction, they would be the person to just begin a gentle dialogue with about it. Yeah, those are the kind of steps that I would suggest you begin with, assuming on the basis that you've made the decision that you're not happy with your addiction and you want to improve the quality of your life, which is what I'm all about. Okay, I'm just going to say a couple of things. I think about sex addicts as opposed to porn addicts. And that is that, as I said at the beginning of this recording, that the difference as far as I'm concerned is that sex addicts are more likely to want to actually meet with people and engage in sexual behavior rather than just watch it on a screen. The same kind of 12-step fellowships are available for sex addicts as well. And I think basically the same process. Go to one of those websites, at the very least, look to find out if your behavior constitutes a compulsion, a habit, something that needs treatment. And I guess the other thing you can do is also look on various websites for books on sexual addiction, porn addiction, and so on. There are various agencies as well that can help you with all of that. I hope that if you've been watching now, or if you see this video later on, that you enjoy it, that it's useful to you. I will be back on Thursday at 3:30. Please do come and bring your questions so that I'm not just producing a monologue. Thank you for your time and attention.